Auschwitz. Even now, the name carries the weight of human cruelty, a place where the world's imagination fails to keep pace with reality. More than 1 million people were murdered here, gassed, starved, beaten, or worked to death. But behind the machinery of extermination was another, quieter weapon. Terror performed in plain sight. Inside the barbed wire, death was not only hidden in gas chambers, it was staged. Executions were turned into spectacles. A ritual of fear played out on the roll call square in front of thousands who were forced to watch. Auschwitz was not only a killing center, it was a theater, built to remind every prisoner that their life belonged to someone else. The story begins in the spring of 1940. Germany had conquered Poland. The Gestapo prisons overflowed with Polish teachers, priests, and resistance members. The Nazis needed a new facility, one isolated enough to disappear from the map, but close enough to the railway to feed an endless stream of victims. They found it near a small town in southern Poland, Auschwitz. In May 1940, the first fences went up around a cluster of abandoned Polish army barracks. The name was Germanized to Auschwitz. Its first purpose was simple: to imprison and crush the Polish intelligentsia. On June 14th, the first transport arrived. 728 men. They were lawyers, teachers, scouts, soldiers, people who had once been the backbone of a nation. When they stepped off the train, they still had names. Within hours, those names were replaced by numbers tattooed into flesh. Identity became arithmetic. Humanity became inventory. At the center of this new world stood Rudolf Höss, the first commandant, a man who saw efficiency as morality. Under his control, Auschwitz became an experiment in organized dehumanization. Food was scarce, violence constant, and death casual. Prisoners were whipped for slowing down, beaten for speaking, shot for existing in the wrong place at the wrong time. The rules were unwritten, but absolute. The SS could do anything. And from the very first months, they discovered a method more effective than bullets: public punishment. The earliest executions were improvisations. A prisoner caught stealing bread might be hanged between barracks, while others were forced to stand at attention. At first, the guards made the prisoners watch as a lesson. Soon, they made them participate, holding ropes, digging graves, or carrying the dead. By the end of 1940, dozens had been publicly executed. Most had not tried to escape or fight back. Some had simply shared food, whispered prayers, or refused to salute. The reason didn't matter. The performance did. Morning roll call became a stage. The condemned were dragged forward, their crimes read aloud. SS guards in polished boots surrounded the crowd. Rifles were raised. Cameras sometimes clicked. And when the trapdoor opened, the lesson was repeated. Obedience was survival. Mercy was treason. The bodies often remained hanging for hours. Crows gathered. The smell spread across the camp. Those who looked away were beaten. Those who cried were noted by name. It worked. Fear became currency, traded daily, renewed every dawn. By early 1941, Auschwitz was expanding. New transports arrived almost every day, from cities and villages across occupied Poland. The small complex of red brick barracks could no longer contain the growing tide of prisoners. Disease spread through overcrowded blocks. Rats crawled through straw mattresses, soaked with sweat and blood. But still, The camp functioned with mechanical precision. Every day began with the same ritual: the whistle at dawn, the freezing air, the endless roll call. Thousands of prisoners lined up in rows while guards counted, shouted, and struck anyone who faltered. In those moments, the silence of the condemned was part of the system. Then, in June 1941, a new wave of prisoners arrived. The first Soviet soldiers captured during the German invasion of the USSR. They came barefoot, starving, and covered in lice. The Nazis saw them not as soldiers, not even as humans, but as Untermenschen, subhumans to be exterminated through work and example. Most never made it past the gates. The weakest were marched directly to pits behind the fences and shot. Others were forced to dig graves, their own and those of the next group. These killings were done quietly at first, but soon they too became public. Soviet prisoners were paraded before the rest of the camp, accused of sabotage or defiance. They were shot at close range, sometimes forced to stand on chairs before being kicked away, hanging until their bodies stopped moving. The audience was thousands of prisoners, a sea of striped uniforms under the gaze of machine guns. The message was simple: there was no resistance, no salvation, no escape. Each death was a performance, one act in a daily play of domination. In the summer of 1941, that logic reached its most terrifying form. A man from Block 14 escaped. One life, slipping through the fence, triggered collective punishment. Commandant Huss ordered 10 random men from the same barracks to be taken to Block 11, the camp's prison. They were locked inside without food or water, condemned to die of thirst and starvation. Among them was a Polish soldier named Franciszek Gajowniczek. When he cried out that he had a wife and children, a quiet voice rose from the crowd. A Catholic priest named Maximilian Kolbe. Kolbe stepped forward and asked to take Gajowniczek's place. The SS officer agreed with a shrug. Compassion meant nothing to him. It was only another way to demonstrate control. Kolbe spent weeks in darkness, praying as those around him died one by one. When the SS finally opened the cell, only he remained alive. They killed him with a syringe of carbolic acid. His sacrifice became a whisper of light in a world built to extinguish it. A single act of humanity inside the machinery of fear. For the rest of that year, Auschwitz hardened. New gallows were built on the main square. Executions became part of the schedule. Prisoners no longer asked if someone would die today, only who and when. Beyond the walls, construction had already begun on a new site, a vast expanse of fields and mud a few kilometers away. It would be called Birkenau. No one yet knew that it would become the deadliest place on Earth. Inside Auschwitz Birkenau, the rhythm of life continued. Roll call, work, punishment, death. And above it all, the quiet applause of terror. The SS no longer needed to shout. The fear did the talking for them. By the beginning of 1942, Auschwitz was no longer a single camp. It had multiplied. A few kilometers from the main compound, on the open fields near the village of Brzezinka, new fences rose. The SS called it Auschwitz II Birkenau. To the prisoners who built it, it was just hell stretching to the horizon. Birkenau was designed to solve a problem. The Nazi system of murder needed more space, more speed, more silence. The barracks were wooden, hastily built, and already decaying. Each block held hundreds, sometimes over 1,000. Prisoners crammed together in rows of bunks. Mud swallowed their feet. Rats chewed through blankets. Disease spread faster than prayer. And in this new camp, the rules grew even simpler. There were none. Public executions, once reserved for special occasions, became routine. The SS erected permanent gallows in the open fields, where prisoners marched daily to work details. They stood as constant reminders that life could end at any moment, and that everyone would be forced to watch. The charges no longer mattered. A broken shovel could mean sabotage. A whispered word between two workers could mean conspiracy. Even eye contact with a guard could mean disrespect. When someone was condemned, the procedure was always the same. The prisoners of the work detail were summoned to stand in formation. The condemned was brought forward, hands bound, often beaten to the edge of consciousness. An SS officer read out a brief statement, accusation, camp number, and the inevitable sentence. Todd Durchtenstrang, death by hanging. Sometimes the prisoner was ordered to speak. A few were forced to recite words written by their executioners. I confess my crime. Let my death be an example. Others, defiant, stayed silent, staring into the crowd until the chair was kicked away. The bodies swayed in the wind as guards watched for reaction. A twitch, a tear, averted eyes. Any of these could mean another name added to tomorrow's list. When the SS was satisfied, they left. The bodies remained, suspended warnings, slowly turning under the gray Polish sky. By spring, Birkenau had begun to devour people faster than the SS could record their names. New arrivals came daily. Jews from Poland, the Netherlands, France, Slovakia, Greece. The transports brought the old and the young, doctors, farmers, mothers carrying children. Most never even saw the barracks. They were sent straight to the gas chambers that had begun operating nearby. But for those who lived inside the camp, death remained both near and visible. Public executions were no longer about punishment. They were theater. The SS used them to keep the living obedient, while the machinery of mass murder ran in the background. In September 1942, 2 Polish prisoners escaped from a work detail outside the perimeter fence. They had stolen civilian clothes and vanished into the forest. The escape triggered panic among the SS. Within hours, 15 men from the same labor group were dragged from their barracks. That evening, the entire camp was ordered to the roll call square. The prisoners stood in rows, thousands of them, as the gallows were prepared. 15 ropes swung in the wind. The condemned were lined up, forced to climb the wooden steps, their faces pale and expressionless. The executioner read their numbers aloud. The commandant gave a signal. The sound of collapsing wood echoed once, then again and again. 15 bodies hung in silence. No one moved. No one dared breathe. Hours passed. The corpses remained. The guards walked among the rows shouting, "This is what happens to traitors!" Anyone who looked down was struck with a rifle butt. Anyone who wept was noted by name. Weeks later, in October, it happened again. 4 Jewish men were caught hiding near the drainage ditch behind Birkenau. They had planned to escape under cover of darkness. Instead, they were dragged to the gallows and hanged, while SS officers lectured the crowd on obedience. It was a sermon of death, and the audience had no choice but to listen. As 1942 drew to a close, Auschwitz had transformed. The killings were now industrial. Gas chambers for the many, gallows for the few. Each method served a different purpose. Gas was for efficiency. Hanging was for control. Inside the main camp, Block 11, the Death Block, became the center of the SS terror system. It was here that prisoners accused of disobedience, resistance, or even minor thefts were interrogated and executed. The courtyard between Block 10 and Block 11, later called the Black Wall, was where hundreds were shot in secret. But sometimes, the SS made it public. They brought prisoners from other blocks to stand in formation. Shots echoed. Bodies fell against the wall and slid to the ground. Blood darkened the snow. Then the prisoners were ordered to return to work. The routine of horror numbed the senses. People learned to walk past corpses without reaction. Fear was no longer an emotion. It was oxygen, something everyone breathed. In 1943, the scale of death reached its peak. Train after train arrived at Birkenau. The chimneys of the crematoria spewed black smoke day and night. Yet even amid this system of mass extermination, the SS continued to use public execution as a deliberate act of control. In March of that year, 74 Soviet prisoners of war were accused of forming a resistance group. They were marched from Block 11 into the courtyard and shot one by one. The bodies were loaded into carts and taken to the crematorium. The sound of gunfire was heard across the camp, followed by silence that lasted for hours. A few months later, in August, another act of defiance was discovered. More than 100 prisoners, Poles, Germans, Russians, were accused of organizing a hunger protest. The SS called it mutiny. That night, guards stormed the barracks and dragged men from their bunks. They were taken to the Black Wall. Most were killed instantly. The rest were finished in the following days. That same year, in Birkenau, executions of women began to rise. In September, several were accused of helping others plan an escape. They were forced to walk barefoot to the gallows, signs around their necks reading "Saboteur" and "Traitor." The entire women's camp was forced to gather and watch. The hangings took place at dawn, in the cold mist of early autumn. When it was over, the guards left the bodies swinging for hours. By now, public death had become as common as morning roll call. The SS didn't need reasons. They only needed an audience. And yet, beneath the fear, small sparks of resistance survived. Whispers of defiance in a place built to erase them. These whispers would soon turn into something louder, a flame that, for a brief moment, shattered the silence of Auschwitz. By 1944, the rhythm of death inside Auschwitz was absolute. Transports arrived, selections were made, and the smoke of the crematoria never stopped. The SS had turned killing into administration, a process of lists, trains, and schedules. But even in this world of obedience and despair, a few still found the courage to resist. The first sparks came from the women. Inside the munitions factory known as Union Werke, hundreds of female prisoners labored 12 hours a day, producing gunpowder for the German war effort. Among them were Rosa Robota, Alla Gertner, Regina Safferstein, and Esther Weitblum, young Jewish women who understood that survival without dignity was not life at all. Under the eyes of guards and overseers, they began to steal tiny amounts of gunpowder, a pinch hidden in a handkerchief, a trace in a seam, a few grains pressed into the lining of a shoe. It was hopelessly small and impossibly dangerous. Over months, the powder made its way out of the factory and into the hands of the Sonderkommando. the Jewish prisoners forced to work in the crematoria. They handled the bodies, scrubbed the floors, shoveled the ashes. They knew that when their turn came, others would do the same to them. They lived at the heart of the machinery of death and saw its every detail. And they knew that silence could not save them. On October 7, 1944, the impossible happened. At Crematorium 4, a sudden explosion tore through the air. Flames reached into the gray sky, smoke mixed with screams. The Sonderkommando had risen. Armed with stones, hammers, and a few stolen pistols, they killed several SS guards and tried to storm the fences. For a few minutes, just minutes, the order of Auschwitz broke. But order was what the SS understood best. Reinforcements arrived within the hour. Machine guns rattled. The uprising was crushed before it could spread. More than 450 prisoners were killed, most within sight of the crematoria they had tried to destroy. The reprisals came quickly. Dozens were executed that same night, shot against the walls or hanged on the gallows. The 4 women who had smuggled the gunpowder were hunted down, beaten, and tortured in blocks 10 and 11. For weeks, the SS interrogated them, demanding names. They gave none. On January 6, 1945, with Soviet artillery already echoing in the distance, the women were led to a small square near the women's camp in Birkenau. It was freezing. Snow covered the ground. Hundreds of prisoners were forced to stand barefoot and watch. One by one, Rosa, Alla, Regina, and Esther were hanged. There were no speeches, no last words recorded, only silence and the sound of ropes tightening in the cold air. Their bodies hung until nightfall. Their courage, though unseen, became legend. After the revolt, paranoia consumed the SS. They feared another uprising, another explosion of defiance. Every whisper was investigated, every shadow suspected. Executions increased. Sometimes there were trials lasting minutes, often there were none. In November 1944, 6 Czech prisoners were caught smuggling letters to the outside world. They were hanged at the main gate of Birkenau, in full view of thousands of workers returning from labor. A few weeks later, 10 Polish men were accused of digging a tunnel beneath their barracks. Whether the tunnel existed or not didn't matter. The gallows were already waiting. They were executed in front of the entire block, a final reminder that even as the Reich collapsed, its cruelty remained precise. The gallows by then were permanent structures, part of the landscape like watchtowers and barbed wire. They no longer had to be built for each execution. They were maintained like equipment, oiled and ready. By January 1945, the Red Army was less than a week's march away. The SS began destroying evidence, burning documents, blowing up crematoria, erasing traces of the crimes they could no longer control. Yet the killing continued. On January 18th, evacuation orders arrived. Tens of thousands of prisoners were forced onto what became known as the death marches. It was 20 degrees Celsius. They had no shoes, little clothing, no food. Those who collapsed were shot or left to freeze. Those who refused to march were hanged on the spot, often in groups of 3 or 4, using the same ropes that had already claimed hundreds. Even in its final days, Auschwitz demanded ritual. Every death, even a chaotic one, had to serve as an example. Terror remained organized to the very end. When Soviet soldiers entered the camp on January 27, 1945, they found only 7,000 survivors. Most were skeletal, unable to stand. The barracks were littered with corpses, frozen where they had fallen. The SS had fled days earlier, leaving behind piles of clothes, hair, and ash, and the gallows still standing. The liberators moved slowly, stunned by what they saw. Cameras clicked. Doctors treated the dying. But no one could truly comprehend what had happened here. Auschwitz was no longer a camp. It was a wound cut into the earth. In the months that followed, investigators documented what remained. They photographed the execution wall between blocks 10 and 11. They measured bullet holes. They took statements from survivors who could barely speak. Each testimony was a fragment of the same story, a system that had made death a public lesson. Justice was imperfect, uneven, but it came. And yet, no verdict could measure what had been done. For those who survived, the memories of public executions remained sharper than any other horror. Many said the gas chambers killed the body, but the hangings killed the soul. They remembered the silence of the crowd, the orders barked in German, the sound of rope against wood, and the helplessness that followed. They remembered how fear became language, how even breathing felt like disobedience. In post-war interviews, one survivor said, "The hangings were worse than the gas. We saw them. We stood there. They wanted us to watch, and we did today." The remnants of those places still stand. The courtyard of Block 11, the Black Wall, is silent. Visitors walk slowly, some whisper, others can't speak at all. The gallows are gone, but the posts remain, darkened by time and memory. The tracks that once carried cattle cars into Birkenau now end in grass. Yet the air feels heavy, as if the ground itself remembers. Auschwitz has become a museum, a grave, and a warning. The guide's voice echoes across the yard. Here, prisoners were executed by hanging. The sentence sounds ordinary, almost administrative, but those words hold more pain than language can contain. What happened in Auschwitz was not a moment of madness, not an accident of war. It was deliberate, planned, organized, rehearsed. The public executions were not side acts. They were lessons in domination. The SS understood that to control people completely, you must make them witness their own destruction. To rule by fear, you must teach it in daylight. That was the true purpose of the gallows and the gun. Not just to kill, but to instruct. To make obedience instinctive. To erase the idea of resistance before it could form. And yet, despite all of that, people resisted. They whispered prayers. They stole gunpowder. They traded pieces of bread. They looked at one another when they were told not to. In a place designed to crush the human spirit, the mere act of remembering each other's names was rebellion. When you walk through Auschwitz today, the wind carries faint sounds, gravel under shoes, the creak of old wood, the whisper of trees. If you listen long enough, it almost feels like the echo of those roll calls, the same counting, the same silence. But the difference is this. Now, people come to bear witness willingly. The fear that once silenced them has turned into memory, and memory is the only thing that defeats forgetting. Because forgetting is what allowed it to happen. Auschwitz stands as proof that terror can be taught, but also that courage can survive even inside it. The hangings, the shootings, the spectacle of punishment, all were meant to erase humanity. Instead, they force the world to confront what humanity can become when morality dies. In the end, the ropes rotted, the gallows fell. The empire that built them collapsed into dust. But the names of those who stood beneath them, Rosa Robota, Alla Gertner, Regina Safferstein, Esther Weichblum, Maximilian Kolbe, and countless others remain. They are the answer to the silence. Auschwitz was designed to be eternal. It wasn't. Its survivors carried its truth into the world, and that truth has never stopped speaking.